What if I told you that the greatest mentor in all of Westeros wasn't a lord, wasn't a king, and wasn't even a famous knight? What if I told you he was a hedge knight who never won a single tournament, died alone on the side of a road, and was buried under a tree by his teenage squire? And yet, this man, Ser Arlan of Pennytree, shaped the future of an entire kingdom more profoundly than almost any other character in George R.R. Martin's world. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most overlooked yet crucial figures in the history of Westeros. We're talking about a man who took a street urchin from Flea and turned him into Duncan the Tall, the future Lord Commander of the King's Guard. We're examining why his approach to mentorship was so revolutionary that it literally changed the course of Targaryen history. And we're going to compare him to another famous mentor from the series, Ned Stark, to show you exactly why Arlan's methods were superior in almost every conceivable way. If you're a fan of the Duncan Egg stories, if you're excited about the upcoming HBO series A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, or if you just love exploring the deeper lore of Game of Thrones, you're going to want to stick around for this one, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why Ser Arlan of Pennytree deserves to be remembered as one of the most influential figures in Westerosi history, even if he never sat on a throne or commanded an army. Let's start with the basics. Who exactly was Ser Arlan of Pennytree? Born in the small village of Pennytree in the Riverlands, Arlan was what they called a hedge knight, a wandering knight without lands, without a castle, without wealth or prestige. He was small and slim, closer to 60 than 50 when he died, with a lifetime of adventures behind him and very little to show for it in terms of material wealth. But here's what makes Arlan fascinating. Despite being a hedge knight, despite having no lands or titles, he had actually accomplished quite a bit in his younger days. He defeated Sir Daemon Lannister in a tourney at Lannisport. Think about that for a moment. A lowly hedge knight defeating a knight from one of the most powerful families in Westeros. In 193 AC, he unhorsed Lord Stokeworth and the bastard of Harrenhal in a melee at King's Landing. These weren't minor achievements. Arlan could hold his own against the best warriors in the realm. Perhaps his most prestigious moment came at a tourney at Storm's End in 199 AC, where he faced Prince Baelor Targaryen, the greatest knight of his age. Arlan claimed he broke 7 lances against Baelor, though the prince remembered it as only 4. Either way, lasting even 4 lances against Baelor Breakspear was an incredible achievement, one that Arlan carried with him for the rest of his life. He was so proud of that moment that he chose never to joust again after that day, preferring to remember himself at his best rather than risk tarnishing that memory with a lesser performance. Arlan also fought in the First Blackfyre Rebellion, the most devastating civil war in Targaryen history. He and his nephew Roger fought beneath Lord Hayford's banners at the Battle of the Redgrass Field. Roger was killed in that battle, and Arlan was standing right next to Lord Hayford when the Lord was slain by Lord Gorman Peak. These weren't just stories. These were real, traumatic experiences that shaped who Arlan was as a knight and as a mentor. His personal heraldry was a winged silver chalice on a brown field. When he was a little boy, his grandfather took him to King's Landing, where he saw the last dragon before it died a year later. Imagine that. Arlan could literally say he had seen a dragon with his own eyes. This gave him a connection to the old world, to the age of dragons and magic that very few people in his era could claim. Now, here's where Arlan's story becomes legendary. After losing his nephew Roger at the Redgrass Field, Arlan found himself without a squire. So where did he go looking for a replacement? Not to the sons of lesser nobles, not to promising young knights in training at some castle. No, he went to the absolute worst place in all of Westeros, Flea. Flea was the slum of King's Landing, a place of desperation, poverty, and misery. It was where unwanted children were left to die, where disease ran rampant, where people fought over scraps of food. And it was there that Arlan found a boy. We don't even know his real name. Everyone just called him Dunk. This child was probably around 5 or 6 years old, maybe younger, living as a street urchin, fighting for survival every single day. What did Arlan see in this boy? We don't know for certain. Maybe he saw potential. Maybe he saw himself. Maybe he just saw a child who needed help and decided that helping was the right thing to do. Whatever the reason, Arlan took this nameless street urchin as his squire, and in doing so, he set in motion events that would change the history of Westeros forever. For the next 10 years or so, Dunk traveled with Ser Arlan throughout the Seven Kingdoms. They served many different lords and fought in many different conflicts. 3 years before the tourney at Ashford, they served Lord Dondarrion in battle with the Vulture King. They also spent half a year in service to Lord Florent. Arlan took Dunk everywhere with him, exposing the boy to all aspects of knightly life, not just the glamorous parts. And during all those years, Arlan was teaching Dunk, not just how to fight, not just how to care for horses and armor, but how to be a good man, how to be honorable in a world that often rewarded dishonor, how to stand up for the weak even when it was dangerous, how to keep your word even when breaking it would be easier. These lessons weren't abstract concepts, they were lived experiences that Dunk absorbed day after day after day. Arlan affectionately called Dunk thick as a castle wall and slow as an aurochs. This wasn't meant as an insult, it was said with genuine fondness. Arlan recognized that Dunk wasn't the cleverest boy in the world, but he also saw that Dunk had something more important, a good heart and an unshakable sense of right and wrong. So what made Arlan such an effective mentor? Let's break down his teaching philosophy, because it's genuinely revolutionary for Westeros. First and foremost, Arlan believed in teaching through example. He didn't just tell Dunk how a knight should behave, he showed him every single day. When they accepted a lord's meat and mead, Arlan would remind Dunk that all their actions reflected on that lord. Always do more than he expects of you, never less. Never flinch at any task or hardship. This is crucial. Arlan wasn't teaching Dunk to be subservient or obedient. He was teaching him to have pride in his work, to understand that excellence comes from personal standards rather than external rewards. Whether they were mucking out stables or fighting in battle, the approach was the same. Do the job well because that's who you are, not because someone is watching. Second, Arlan taught practical wisdom, not just romantic ideals. He told Dunk never to spend excessive money on feeding a horse treats and never to name a horse because their deaths would cause immense grief. But here's the beautiful part. Arlan himself never followed this advice. He named his horses Thunder, Chestnut, and Sweetfoot. He gave them treats. He formed emotional attachments to them. Dunk noticed this hypocrisy, but he understood what it really meant. Arlan was teaching him that knights are human, that it's okay to have feelings, that following your heart doesn't make you weak. Third, Arlan believed in realistic expectations. He never promised Dunk glory or wealth. He never told him that being a knight meant winning tournaments and marrying princesses. Instead, he showed Dunk the reality of knightly life for most people: constant travel, hard work, occasional employment, and very little recognition. Once, when drunk, Arlan promised to take Dunk to a brothel, but when he sobered up, he didn't remember the promise. This might seem like a small thing, but it taught Dunk that even good men have flaws, that you can be honorable without being perfect. Fourth, and this is perhaps most important, Arlan taught Dunk to think for himself. He didn't create a mindless follower. He encouraged questions. He explained his reasoning. When Dunk observed something about the world, Arlan would discuss it with him rather than just handing down pronouncements from on high. This created a student who could make his own moral judgments, who could adapt to new situations, who could lead others when the time came. Fifth, Arlan understood the importance of self-worth. He took a boy who had nothing, who was nobody, and he treated him with respect and dignity. He praised Dunk generously. He showed genuine affection for the boy. This wasn't just kindness, it was strategic. Arlan was building Dunk's confidence, giving him the psychological foundation he would need to face the challenges ahead. In 209 AC, Ser Arlan and Dunk were traveling to a tourney at Ashford Meadow when Arlan caught a chill. On the side of the road, with no witnesses, no ceremony, no audience, the old hedge knight died. Dunk buried him on the western slope of a hill, facing the sunset, because Ser Arlan liked sunsets. Think about how lonely that death was. No family present, no fellow knights, just a teenage boy and a dying old man on the side of a road. And yet, in that moment, Arlan gave Dunk his final and perhaps most important lesson. He showed him that death comes for everyone, that it doesn't matter if you're a king or a hedge knight, we all end up in the ground. What matters is what you do with the time you have. Dunk inherited Arlan's horses, Thunder, Chestnut, and Sweetfoot. He inherited Arlan's armor and weapons. He inherited Arlan's winged chalice sigil on a battered oak shield. But more importantly, he inherited Arlan's values, his sense of honor, his commitment to protecting the weak, his understanding that knighthood is about service rather than glory. And here's where things get interesting. When Dunk arrived at Ashford, he told the steward, a man named Plummer, that Ser Arlan had knighted him before his death. He called himself Sir Duncan the Tall. But was this true? The text strongly suggests it wasn't. There's no scene showing Arlan knighting Dunk. When Dunk thinks about it, his thoughts are evasive. He may have lied about being knighted, but here's the beautiful irony. Whether or not Arlan actually knighted him, Dunk became everything a true knight should be. He defended the innocent. He stood against injustice. He kept his word even when it cost him dearly. He lived by the code that Arlan taught him. In a world where many knights with legitimate knighthoods were cruel, dishonorable, and self-serving, Dunk, who might not have been properly knighted at all, embodied the ideals of knighthood better than almost anyone else. This is Arlan's ultimate legacy. He didn't just train a squire, he created a true knight in spirit, if not in technical ceremony. And that true knight would go on to change the course of history. Let's talk about what happened because of Arlan's mentorship. At the Ashford tourney, Duncan defended a puppeteer named Tencel, who was being brutally attacked by Prince Aegon Targaryen, one of the most sadistic members of the royal family. Duncan didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate the political consequences. He just acted exactly as Arlan had taught him: defend the weak, stand against injustice, no matter the cost. This decision led to Duncan being tried in a trial by 7, a fight to the death against 7 opponents. During these events, Duncan gained a squire, a bald boy called Egg, who turned out to be Prince Aegon Targaryen, son of Prince Maekar. In the trial, Prince Baelor Targaryen, the greatest knight in the realm, died defending Duncan. This tragedy had enormous consequences. Baelor would have been king. His death changed the succession. His death changed everything. But here's what's crucial. After the trial, Prince Maekar, grieving for his brother but recognizing something special in Duncan, allowed his son Egg to continue as Duncan's squire. Maekar wanted Egg to learn from Duncan the very lessons that Arlan had taught. Lessons about humility, about honor, about the lives of common people. Maekar recognized that Duncan, this supposedly low-born hedge knight, had something that no one in the palace could teach. So Egg and Duncan traveled Westeros together for years. They fought in battles, they settled disputes, they encountered Blackfire rebellions. And all the while, Egg was learning from Duncan the same way Duncan had learned from Arlan. He was learning that the small folk matter. He was learning that justice should apply to everyone, not just the nobility. He was learning that power comes with responsibility. Eventually, Egg became King Aegon V Targaryen, one of the last great kings of the Targaryen dynasty. He was known as Aegon the Unlikely because no one expected him to become king. He was a 4th son, far from the succession. But when he did take the throne, he ruled with compassion and wisdom. He tried to improve the lives of the small folk. He tried to limit the power of the great houses. He tried to create a more just and equitable Westeros. And all of these reforms, all of this compassion can be traced directly back to the lessons Egg learned from Duncan, which Duncan learned from Arlan. A hedge knight from Pennytree, a man who died alone on the side of a road, fundamentally changed how a king viewed his kingdom. Duncan himself became Lord Commander of the King's Guard under Aegon V, the highest military honor a knight could achieve. He served his friend loyally until they both died in the tragedy at Summerhall. And his legacy continued even after death. Duncan was the ancestor of Brienne of Tarth, another warrior who embodied the true ideals of knighthood in a cynical world. Now, let's get to the heart of our discussion. Why would Ned Stark have benefited from having someone like Arlan as a mentor instead of Jon Arryn? To be clear, Jon Arryn wasn't a bad mentor. He raised Ned and Robert Baratheon at the Eyrie, teaching them about honor, duty, and lordship. He was a good man who did his best, but his approach to mentorship had significant limitations that Arlan's approach didn't have. First, let's look at what Ned Stark actually learned from Jon Arryn. Ned learned that honor is paramount, that you should always tell the truth, that you should keep your oaths no matter what. He learned that a lord has responsibilities to his people. He learned military strategy and governance. These are all good things. Jon Arryn produced two men who were deeply loyal to him and who tried to live honorably. But here's the problem. Jon Arryn taught Ned to see the world in absolute terms. Honor is good, dishonor is bad, truth is right, lies are wrong. There was no room for nuance, no recognition that sometimes the honorable choice leads to terrible consequences, no understanding that in the complex world of politics, rigid adherence to ideals can be deadly. Contrast this with Arlan's approach. Arlan also believed in honor, but his honor was tempered with practical wisdom. He understood that you could be honorable while still being flexible. He taught Dunk to defend the weak, but he also taught him to pick his battles. He showed Dunk that you could maintain your principles while still surviving in a harsh world. Second, Jon Arryn raised Ned in the Eyrie, a castle surrounded by nobility, insulated from the reality of how most people in Westeros lived. Yes, Ned learned about leadership, but it was leadership from above, from a position of power and privilege. He never experienced what it was like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of lords and knights, to have no protection or safety net. Arlan, on the other hand, lived among the small folk. He was a hedge knight, which meant he was only barely above common people in social status. He showed Dunk what life was really like for most of Westeros. He showed him that lords and knights had power over people who couldn't fight back, and that this power came with a moral responsibility that many ignored. This gave Duncan and later Egg a perspective that almost no one in power ever had. Third, and this is crucial, Jon Arryn taught Ned that honor would protect him, that if you did the right thing, you would be rewarded. This wasn't malicious. Jon Arryn genuinely believed this because it had been true in his own life. He was a great lord, respected and honored, who died of old age after a successful life. His experience suggested that honor and success went hand in hand, but this lesson was dangerously naive. When Ned went to King's Landing as Hand of the King, he believed that truth would win out. He believed that when he revealed that Joffrey wasn't Robert's son, that justice would prevail. He believed that Cersei would be held accountable. He believed that doing the right thing would lead to the right outcome, and this belief got him killed. Now imagine if Ned had learned from someone like Arlan instead. Arlan would have taught him that honor is important, yes, but survival matters too. Arlan would have taught him that sometimes you have to be clever, that you can't just charge forward with the truth and expect everyone to applaud you for it. Arlan would have taught him that in a world of predators, being honorable doesn't make you safe, it makes you a target, so you need to be smart about how you pursue justice. Fourth, Jon Arryn created a dependency on him. Both Ned and Robert looked to Jon as a father figure, someone whose approval they sought, someone whose guidance they needed. When Jon died, both men were lost. Robert descended into alcoholism and gluttony. Ned felt obligated to become Hand of the King even though he didn't want to, largely because he felt he owed it to Jon's memory. Arlan, in contrast, prepared Duncan to stand alone. Yes, Duncan mourned Arlan's death. Yes, he missed his mentor, but Arlan had given him all the tools he needed to continue on his own. Arlan didn't create a disciple who needed a master. He created an independent knight who could make his own decisions. When Arlan died, Duncan didn't fall apart. He buried his mentor with honor, inherited his equipment, and continued to the tourney. He was ready because Arlan had made sure he was ready. Fifth, Jon Arryn's lessons about honor were abstract and idealistic. He taught principles, rules, codes of conduct. These principles were good in theory, but they weren't connected to the messy reality of human nature. Ned learned what a knight should be in an ideal world, but not what a knight needs to be in the real world. Arlan's lessons were grounded in experience. He didn't just tell Duncan that knights should defend the innocent. He showed him specific situations where that defense was necessary and how to navigate them. He didn't just preach about honor, he demonstrated it through his daily actions. And critically, he also showed Duncan his flaws, his hypocrisies, his moments of weakness. This taught Duncan that being honorable doesn't mean being perfect. It means trying your best and learning from your mistakes. Sixth, Jon Arryn never prepared Ned for the possibility of failure. The lesson Ned learned was that if you're honorable, things will work out. But what happens when they don't? What happens when you do everything right and still lose? Ned had no framework for this. When his honor led him into Cersei's trap, when his truth-telling resulted in his imprisonment, he was psychologically unprepared for it. His entire worldview crumbled. Arryn, though, taught Duncan that failure was always possible. Arryn himself had failed many times. He never won a tournament. He lost his nephew at Redgrass Field. He died penniless on the side of a road, but he never let failure destroy him. He kept going. He kept trying to be a good knight even when the world didn't reward him for it. This resilience, this ability to maintain your values even in defeat, is something Duncan learned and carried with him throughout his life. 7th, and this ties everything together, Jon Arryn prepared Ned to be a lord. He taught him how to govern, how to command, how to make decisions from a position of authority. These are important skills, and Ned used them well as Lord of Winterfell. But Jon never taught Ned how to navigate situations where he didn't have power, where he was at someone else's mercy, where his title and authority meant nothing. Arryn prepared Duncan to survive with nothing. He taught him how to earn his bread. He taught him how to deal with people who had more power than him. He taught him how to maintain his dignity and his principles even when he had no leverage. This is why Duncan could adapt to any situation. Whether he was fighting beside great lords or serving minor nobles or wandering the roads with nothing but his horse and his armor, Duncan knew how to conduct himself. Let's think about Ned's crucial mistakes in King's Landing through the lens of what he might have done differently with Arryn's training. When Ned discovered the truth about Joffrey's parentage, his honor demanded that he expose it immediately. This is what Jon Arryn had taught him. Truth matters above all else. So Ned told Cersei directly, giving her warning, giving her time to prepare, essentially signing his own death warrant. What would Arryn have taught him? Arryn would have said, yes, the truth matters, but timing matters too. Be clever about it. Secure your own safety first. Make sure you have allies. Don't show your cards to your enemy before you're ready to act. Honor doesn't require stupidity. You can be truthful and strategic at the same time. When Ned was imprisoned and given the choice between confessing to treason or dying, he initially chose death. His honor wouldn't allow him to lie, even to save himself. This is pure Jon Arryn training, principles over survival. But then Varys reminded him of his daughters. What about Sansa? What about Arya? And suddenly, Ned realized that his honor was about to get his children killed. So he confessed, he lied, he sacrificed his reputation to save his family. This moment is heartbreaking because it shows that Ned's rigid honor had put him in a position where he had to betray everything he believed in. If he had learned from someone like Arryn, he might have understood from the beginning that sometimes you have to compromise, that purity of principle is a luxury you can't always afford, that protecting the people you love might require you to bend your ideals. Think about Duncan at the Ashford tourney. When he defended Tansel, he knew it was dangerous. He knew attacking a prince could get him killed. But he also recognized that not all dangerous actions are stupid actions. Some things are worth the risk. He acted with courage, but also with awareness of the consequences. He didn't stumble blindly into disaster the way Ned did. Or consider the moment when Egg revealed his true identity to save Duncan. Duncan could have been angry that Egg had lied to him about who he was, but instead, Duncan understood that sometimes people have reasons for their secrets, that trust is built through actions rather than perfect honesty. This nuanced understanding of truth and loyalty is something Arryn had modeled for him. Ned's greatest flaw was that he couldn't distinguish between personal honor and political effectiveness. He thought they were the same thing. He thought that being a good man meant ruling in the same straightforward, honest way in King's Landing that he had ruled in Winterfell. But Winterfell was his home, where everyone knew him, where the culture valued his northern honor. King's Landing was a pit of vipers where his honor made him predictable and exploitable. So what was it specifically about Arryn's mentorship style that made it superior? Let's break this down systematically. First, Arryn understood that mentorship isn't about creating a copy of yourself. It's about giving someone the tools to become the best version of themselves. He didn't try to turn Dunk into another Arlan. He recognized Dunk's particular strengths and weaknesses and worked with them. Dunk was never going to be clever or educated or sophisticated. Arryn accepted this, Instead, he emphasized Dunk's natural courage, his physical strength, his instinctive sense of justice. He built on what was there rather than trying to force Dunk into a mold that didn't fit. This is sophisticated pedagogy, meeting the student where they are rather than where you wish they were. Second, Arlen believed in experiential learning. He didn't just lecture Dunk about knighthood, he took him into the world and showed him. They served different lords, so Dunk could see different styles of leadership. They fought in battles so Dunk could understand the reality of violence. They traveled through all the regions of Westeros so Dunk could see how different people lived. Every experience was a lesson, and every lesson was grounded in reality. Third, Arlen modeled the behavior he wanted to teach. This is perhaps the most powerful teaching tool there is. Dunk watched Arlen for years. He saw how Arlen treated people, how he made decisions, how he handled disappointment, how he maintained his principles in difficult circumstances. Children and students learn more from what they observe than from what they're told, and Arlen understood this instinctively. Fourth, Arlen created emotional security. He showed Dunk genuine affection. He gave him praise. He made him feel valued. This wasn't just kindness, it was pedagogically essential. Students learn best when they feel safe, when they know their mentor cares about them, when they're not afraid of judgment or rejection. Arlen gave Dunk this foundation, and it allowed Dunk to take risks, to make mistakes, to grow without fear. Fifth, Arlen taught resilience through his own example. He had lived a hard life. He had known failure and loss. He had fought in terrible battles. He had lost people he cared about, but he kept going. He maintained his values. He found joy in small things like sunsets. He showed Dunk that life knocks you down, and what matters is getting back up. Sixth, Arlen understood that moral education happens through stories and experiences, not through rules and lectures. When he told Dunk about breaking lances against Baelor Breakspear, he wasn't just bragging. He was teaching Dunk that you can face someone greater than yourself with courage and dignity. When he talked about the last dragon, he was connecting Dunk to history, giving him a sense of being part of something larger than himself. Arlen died on the side of a road with no witnesses and no ceremony. But his legacy echoes through the history of Westeros in ways that most kings never achieve. Through Duncan, he influenced Prince Aegon. Through Aegon, he influenced the governance of an entire kingdom. Through Duncan's descendants, he influenced characters we know from the main series like Brienne of Tarth. But beyond these specific connections, Arlen's legacy is philosophical. He proved that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go. He took a child with literally nothing, no name, no family, no prospects, and he showed that child he could be something noble and valuable. This is transformative mentorship at its finest. He also proved that you don't need wealth or power to make a difference. Arlen never had a castle, he never commanded armies, he never sat on any councils, but through the person he trained, he shaped the future. This is a powerful message in a world obsessed with bloodlines and hereditary power. What you do matters more than who you are. Think about the chain of influence. Arlen teaches Duncan, Duncan teaches Egg, Egg becomes king and tries to improve the lives of the small folk. Those reforms, limited as they were, represented a fundamental shift in how Targaryens thought about their responsibilities. The idea that a king should care about common people, that power comes with obligations, that the throne exists to serve rather than to rule, these concepts came from Egg's experiences with Duncan, which came from Duncan's experiences with Arlen. And on a smaller, more personal scale, Arlen showed that love and mentorship can happen anywhere. He found Dunk in a slum. He had no obligation to help this child. There was nothing in it for him. But he did it anyway because it was the right thing to do, and that single act of compassion had consequences that rippled through generations. Compare this to the great houses with their elaborate schemes and their desperate grabs for power. How many of their carefully laid plans actually succeeded? How many of their dynasties survived? But Arlen, with no plan except to be a decent person and pass on what he knew, created something that lasted. What can we learn from Ser Arlan of Pennytree today? What makes his approach to mentorship relevant beyond the pages of fantasy novels? I think there are several crucial lessons here that apply to anyone in a position to guide or teach others. First, meet people where they are. Arlen didn't try to force Dunk into being something he wasn't. He worked with Dunk's natural qualities and built on them. Too often, mentors try to create copies of themselves or force students into predefined molds. The best mentors recognize that everyone is different and that good teaching means adaptation. Second, model the behavior you want to teach. You can't fake integrity. You can't pretend to have values you don't actually hold. Arlen lived the lessons he taught, and that's why they stuck. His teachings weren't abstract principles. They were demonstrated truths. If you want to influence someone, you have to embody what you're trying to teach. Third, combine idealism with pragmatism. Arlen believed in honor and knighthood and protecting the weak, but he also understood that you had to survive in the real world. He taught Dunk to have principles, but not to be stupid about them. This balance is crucial. Pure idealism gets you killed. Pure pragmatism makes you corrupt. You need both. Fourth, emotional security enables growth. Arlen made Dunk feel valued and cared for. This gave Dunk the confidence to take risks, to stand up to princes, to become something greater than his origin suggested was possible. If you want someone to reach their potential, you have to make them feel safe enough to try and fail and try again. Fifth, teach resilience through example. Arlen had failed many times but never gave up on his values. He showed Dunk that setbacks are part of life, that what matters is how you respond to them. In a world that often emphasizes constant success and achievement, this lesson about maintaining your integrity through failure is invaluable. Sixth, remember that small acts of kindness can have enormous consequences. Arlen took in a street urchin. He probably never imagined that this child would become Lord Commander of the King's Guard or that his training would influence a king. He did it because it seemed like the right thing to do. And that's often how the most important actions happen, not through grand schemes, but through simple decency. With HBO's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms coming out, starring Peter Claffey as Duncan and Dexter Saul Ansell as Egg, we're going to see this relationship brought to life on screen. And I hope the show really emphasizes what we've been talking about. The importance of Arlen's influence, even though he dies before or at the very beginning of the story. Danny Webb has been cast as Ser Arlan, and even though we might only see him briefly, his presence should loom over the entire season. Every choice Duncan makes, every value he demonstrates, every moment where he stands up for what's right should be understood as a direct result of Arlen's teaching. The show has an opportunity to demonstrate that mentorship isn't just about screen time, it's about lasting influence. When Duncan defends Tansel from Prince Aegon, we should see him remembering something Arlen taught him. When he takes Egg as his squire, we should see him replicating the kindness Arlen showed to him. When he navigates the complex politics of the Ashford tourney, we should see him trying to balance honor with survival the way Arlen would have. The ghost of Ser Arlan should be present in every episode, not as a literal ghost, but as the foundation of who Duncan is. And hopefully, the show will draw implicit comparisons to other mentorship relationships in the larger Game of Thrones universe. We've seen what Jon Arryn's teaching did for Ned Stark, both the strengths and the limitations. We've seen what various teachers did for other characters. Arlen's approach offers something different, a model of mentorship that creates independence rather than dependence, that balances ideals with pragmatism, that recognizes the full humanity of both teacher and student. So let's come back to our original question. Why would Ned Stark have benefited from having Ser Arlan as a mentor instead of Jon Arryn? The answer is that Arlen would have taught him the lessons that Jon Arryn couldn't or wouldn't teach. Arlen would have taught Ned that honor is important, but survival matters too. He would have shown him that you can maintain your principles while still being strategic. He would have prepared him for a world where doing the right thing doesn't always lead to the right outcome. He would have taught him that sometimes you have to be clever, that you can't just rely on being good and expecting everything to work out. Most importantly, Arlen would have taught Ned that true honor isn't about rigid adherence to rules. It's about making the best choices you can in difficult circumstances. It's about protecting the people you love even when that requires compromise. It's about maintaining your core values while still navigating the complex realities of power and politics. Ned Stark died because his honor was too pure, too absolute, too inflexible. He couldn't bend, so he broke. If he had learned from someone like Arlen, someone who understood that honor and pragmatism aren't opposites, he might have survived. He might have been able to protect his family. He might have been able to make a real difference in King's Landing rather than becoming a cautionary tale about the dangers of naive idealism. This isn't to say that Ned was wrong or that his values were bad. Ned Stark was a genuinely good man in a world that often punished goodness. His children carried on his legacy and eventually triumphed in their own ways. His honor inspired loyalty even after death. But imagine how much more effective he could have been, how many lives he could have saved, including his own, if his honor had been tempered with the kind of practical wisdom that Arlan possessed. Ser Arlan of Pennytree never sat on a throne. He never commanded armies. He never won a tournament. He died poor and alone on the side of a road. History barely remembers his name, but through his teaching, through his kindness to one nameless boy from Flea, he changed the world. He showed that mentorship is about giving someone the tools to become better than you are. He showed that the greatest legacy isn't what you achieve yourself, it's what you enable others to achieve. And that's why, in the final analysis, Ser Arlan of Pennytree was the mentor Ned Stark wishes he had. Not because Jon Arryn was bad, but because Arlan understood something crucial that Jon Arryn didn't. He understood that preparing someone for an ideal world is easy. Preparing someone for the real world, with all its complexity and cruelty and moral ambiguity, while still maintaining their capacity for goodness, that's the real challenge. That's true mentorship, and that's exactly what Arlan accomplished. So as we prepare to watch A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, as we see Duncan's adventures brought to life on screen, remember the man who made it all possible. Remember the hedge knight who saw potential in a street urchin. Remember the teacher who understood that the best gift you can give someone is the ability to stand on their own. Remember Ser Arlan of Pennytree, the unsung hero who changed the history of Westeros one lesson at a time. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most underrated characters in George R.R. Martin's world, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We've got more videos coming about the Dunk and Egg stories, about the differences between the books and the show, about the historical context of the Targaryen dynasty, and about so many other fascinating aspects of this incredible world. Drop a comment below telling me what you think about Ser Arlan, whether you agree that he was a better mentor than Jon Arryn, and what you're most excited to see in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Until next time, remember what Ser Arlan taught Duncan: defend the weak, keep your word, and never forget where you came from. Those lessons are just as true in our world as they are in Westeros. Thanks for watching.